Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 84. Millie awoke to the feel of the rocking wagon. The pace had evened out, and she felt groggy and exhausted. She could hear the woman who had fed her medicine humming to herself softly next to her. She saw two of the woman's children moving about quietly, unconsciously not wanting to disturb their mother. Irna periodically looked over at Millie, giving her a warm smile that never quite took, almost as if the woman was trying to convince herself to be in good spirits. The woman reached over and gently brushed away a strand of Millie's hair that had lodged itself against her brow, stuck with sweat from the remains of the fever. "Child, you must forgive me," Irna said. "You and your friend are welcome here. She did right by you, right by us. She watched over us back there. Can you sit up?" Irna held out a hand to Millie. Millie could sense the strength in her posture. Taking her hand, Millie could feel the strength of Irna's grip, powerful and sure. "I'm beginning to feel better. What name should I call you, mistress?" Millie spoke slowly, unsure how to address the mother of three who sat next to her. "Irna. My children are Sana, Mael, and little Island there. I think he likes to watch you," she said with a playful smile. The little boy stood shyly off to one side, peering curiously up at Millie, before darting away, one hand in his mouth. Irna let out a peal of laughter, wiping tears away, as she watched the toddler move back towards them. He reached a hand out to Millie's crimson curls, while trying to make a grunting noise, failing to form words. Millie smiled at the little boy and held her hand out to him, gesturing him onward. His older sister came up behind him and carefully wrapped an arm around the front of him, holding him back protectively. A small makeshift doll hung limply from the crook of her other arm. She looked impassively at Millie, never meeting her eyes. She was silent as she looked on, making strange movements with her arms to her brother without looking away. Her mouth remained still, but her hand made a flurry of movement, gesturing in odd patterns. "She seems very odd. What is her name?" Millie said, turning to look at Irna, making sure she knew she was the object of her question. "I taught Sana to speak with the gestures our hands make. She has never spoken a word. Kel and I worked tirelessly at teaching her symbols when we realized she would never speak willingly. We had to make up most of what we taught her through trial and error, but sometimes I catch Sana watching me, almost like she can hear what I say before I say it." Irna looked down, her eyes growing distant for a moment. She reached over and lay a hand on Sana before making more gestures, pointing to Millie and then to Island. After a moment or two, Sana allowed Irna to break her contact with her brother, but she didn't move away either. She just kept watching Millie, her eyes unblinking. "How long has she been a mute?" Millie wondered aloud. "She spoke once, when she was no more than a year old. She had pointed at Kel and said, 'Dada.' But Sana was there when people were cut down in the streets. She saw it all. Never said a word after that day. My Kellen tried so hard to get her to laugh, to say anything. The best we ever got was a smile. But children are precious. I don't think Kel would ever give up on teaching Sana to speak. He was so patient with her. He was so kind to our children." Irna felt a sob tear away at her. "You and your friend," Irna continued. "Your sister, if that's who she is. Where are you going? What are you running from?" Irna looked with a sudden clarity of expression that Millie hadn't seen before in the other woman. Millie was unsure how much it would be safe to reveal to the other woman. "We intended to meet up with a group of migrant merchants. They were supposed to be on the other end of the canyon we escaped from. Jess told me they would take us in and protect us." Millie looked over again at the other woman intently. "My fate is tied to yours now, young miss. I cannot protect these children all on my own. Even if I could, I would not make it long without help. I need you and your older sister to protect me. For that I will agree to mend your ills and wrap her wound. She's very lucky she has managed to elude the blood fever. That is a nasty way to die. Irna said it without the barest hint of emotion coloring her features. Millie shivered in her bed. Kayana is a good friend of mine. My name is Millie. Kayana will help you. She doesn't want to see any more death, I think. Will you help me too? You are the daughter I would have had she lived. She was bright, just like you. Kellen was never the same after her death. Hardly a year old, but she would be your age now. Irna smiled ruefully, then gathered Sana and Island close. Irna reached out and held Millie's hand. Then she gently placed her fingers on her forehead and moved them down with aching slowness until she covered the young woman's eyes, gently closing each of her eyelids down. Millie stirred briefly, then fell into a deeper sleep. The young woman still needed her strength, Irna thought wistfully. She hoped the two young women would not abandon her and her children. She must come up with a plan to ensnare them to stay. She needed them, a cold part of her thoughts noted with idle disinterest. She stroked the child's face, her eyes tight and desperate. She must not lose her children. She would feed them somehow.